Hi there, welcome to the latest edition of the Front Page, and this week we're talking all about horses. We have got the runaway Dante winner who looks unlikely to go for the Derby. We've got the pacemaker who sprang a shock in the Lockinge on Saturday, and we've said goodbye to some much loved friends. And I am Lee Mottershead, and I'm joined by two much loved friends in this week's edition. In the studio, Jonathan Harding, hello.
How lovely, hello.
A pleasure. And at his home near Newmarket, Peter Scargill. Hello, Pete.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm sorry I can't be with you today. It was a sort of last-minute call-up for me.
Well, absence makes the heart grow fonder. How are you?
I'm tremendously good form, Lee. You know, all set up for a half hour or so of discussing all the key issues within racing.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got the bones of the programme there. And John, how was your Saturday at Newbury in the sunshine?
Very good, yeah. It was a good day actually in the end. Some slightly weird results, but yeah, it was a good day and I got a free fortune cookie, so can't complain.
Don't have ever had a fortune cookie.
No, nor had I, really, but it was a World Pool Hong Kong tie-up with Newbury, so there was all sorts of Hong Kong-y type stuff going on, so that added a little bit of something to it.
Well, I wonder if William Haggas had a fortune cookie over the weekend, what it would have told him, because, Pete, he has a very, very good horse, but a very, very good horse who probably won't run in the Derby. Is that a fair summation?
Yes, spoiler alert, horse that wins Derby trial won't be going for the Derby, probably. Probably might be my word of choice today, given it's already been used several times. Look, economics was very impressive in the Dante, but almost immediately afterwards, everyone went, he's been taken out of the race already, and he probably isn't going to run. So I don't know what you make of it all, really. It's a shame. I did read in one newspaper that it was seen as the death of the Derby, this impressive trial winner not going there. But obviously there's a wider picture and a greater context to take in with this sort of thing. But it was impressive. I mean, I don't know what you guys thought, but you couldn't not be impressed given we were all watching Ancient Wisdom and got taken with his flashy chestnut coming down the outside.
Pete, what was what is the reasoning behind the decision not to go for the Derby? Because it's one that William Haggas was clearly set on because he took the horse out before the Dante.
Yeah, I mean, there's several factors. I mean, firstly, Haggas are extremely good at their jobs and they know what it takes to win the Derby and to win Classic. So clearly, within his training regime, they thought this horse isn't ready. He's inexperienced. That was only his third run on last week. What day was it last week? Wednesday last week?
Thursday.
Sometime last week. Thursday last week. There we are. We're losing track of time already. And he's quite a big horse, reportedly. Obviously, I wasn't there. But he's big, immature horse, not thought to handle Epsom particularly well. And I wouldn't be convinced he would stay either, Lee. I think I talked this time last year about my patented Derby system that helps find Derby winners, all bar Desert Crown it's found in this century. And he wouldn't necessarily be a qualifier on my Derby system, which I'm sure William Haggas and Willian Haggas would be delighted to know. And after he won his maiden at Newbury, they did talk about maybe dropping him down for a mile for stakes races. Yeah. So, he wouldn't necessarily be a dead set horse to stay in the Derby anyway. So there's quite a lot of factors against him. On the other side, it's the Derby. You get one shot at it, and it might come down to whether the owner goes, do you know what, William? I'd really like to run my horse at Epsom.
John, this isn't a new situation for William Haggas to be in. In fact, only, a year and a half or so ago, we had that big Willie Won't He Bailly go for the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe.
Yes.
And William seemed dead set against going for the race all along, and in the end the horse didn't run the race, and given the ground conditions, how they turned out at Longchamp, it's hard to imagine he would have performed anywhere near his best that day there anyway, so it looks like he was proved right. He seems again really set against it here, and as Pete said, you've got a horse who, big horse, looks like he might not handle the track, might not stay. Can you see why they are leaning the way they are leaning?
Completely, and I think it would be different if he still had the Derby entry and then they decided not to run closer to the time. The fact of the matter is he took him out even before he won the trial to remove the temptation. So certain are they that he's not necessarily the type of horse that would handle Epsom. And it's happened before. I seem to remember Telecast as an example of a horse who was very impressive, maybe got slightly talked into the Derby and it didn't go to plan. Now, obviously, it could go either way, but I think they will stick to their guns. I think they've every right to. It's easy for us to say from the sidelines, there's one Derby, have a crack at it, and if he were my horse, it's easy to say, yeah, have a go and pick up the pieces afterwards if it doesn't go to plan. But I think they have been so set, is what I'm trying to say. They've been so clear and so transparent about it that I think they've every right not to run him.
Just looking at the race and the Racing Post analysis quotes afterwards, I thought it was an interesting line from Owen Burrows, whose War Room's on a really good race to be placed, but he said, won't go to Epsom, we'll keep him for Royal Ascot. He's still learning, and Jim Crowley said we might do more harm than good for the future if we were to go to Epsom. So it's clearly not just William Haggas that thinks this. It's a common thread, isn't it? That for some horses, it's just not the right place to go. And in some ways, it highlights why the Derby is the supreme test, because horses have to tick so many boxes to win the race, and if they're not capable of ticking all those boxes at that stage, then they probably should be winning a Derby. Yeah,
and it's a unique test, and that's important. And obviously, I don't really buy this idea that it speaks to the prestige of the Derby being diminished because they're not going to chance a horse there that they don't believe is going to act there. That seems to me to be completely illogical. I think the season is getting longer. It's getting very back-end heavy as well. There are a lot of targets for good horses on the flat now, particularly in the autumn. And the idea of running a horse you don't think is suitable and potentially, I'm always loath to that argument of damaging a horse by running them, because he could run in the Derby and place wherever he places and then still have a fine, perfectly good season. But I think the fact that they're so clear about him not running there means I just can't see it unless the owner has a real desire to go, and it would have to be a real desire to go, I think. I don't think he'll run.
Pete, do you think they will be in any way influenced by how this year's Derby looks, in the sense that obviously we had the desperate events with Hidden Law at Chester. Charlie Appleby has then lost the horse who became his clear number one for the race in Arabian Story. You've got City of Troy, who's clear favourite now for the Derby, having run 9th in the 2000 Guineas. Doesn't look at this stage to be anything like a vintage edition on paper. Will that influence Connections thinking in some way? Should it influence Connections thinking?
Well, Lee, you're so good at this job because you've completely taken out what I was going to mention. This is where I was going to come in with a bit of, dynamic conversation, and you've taken it all out of my hand.
You can still be dynamic.
As an Epsom resident, are you allowed to say it's not a vintage Derby? Do you have to sort of say that it's going to be an excellent Derby every single year?
No, you don't. No, you don't. And I make this point regularly. The term vintage means absolutely nothing if every renewal of a thing is vintage.
I see.
You have to have great and not so great. Don't you have to things to iron out? And this doesn't look at. I mean, might be that Ambiente Friendly wins by 10 lengths, and we start saying, "My God, what an amazing race that was." But at this stage, it doesn't look vintage, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's mind-boggling to some extent to think that City of Troy is actually favourite for the race. Yeah. I mean, he was rubbish at Newmarket, wasn't he? For whatever excuses and talk there's been afterwards, he was rubbish at Newmarket, and he has a lot to prove. And he's not Augusta Redan, who obviously did it last year, but City of Troy isn't Augusta Redan. Obvious point of the day. We lost Arabian Crown. Ancient Wisdom looked a bit slow at Dante. You say Hidden Law's gone as well. So it's, on paper, there isn't a standout horse going into it. If you take City of Troy on face value of his Newmarket run, of course, if he was coming in off the back of a trial win on what he did last year, then it might be different. But that's the circumstances. I just wonder with economics as well. Do you think the fact that there was blood in his nose after the race would have any impact at all, Lee, in terms of their thinking?
They said, haven't they, that potentially that might have been the horse banged his head in the stalls before the race, and Connections didn't seem overly concerned by that, did they? But you spend much more time with horses than I do. Would it be something that would concern you?
Well, I said it depends on what the circumstances are. If it was because he hit his head on the stalls, then we all get bloody noses from time to time, and you recover. Obviously, there was quite a lot with his white face. It stood out quite a lot. But provided it was just a bump on the nose, perhaps it wouldn't be such a big deal. But given the proximity of the Dante to Epsom as well, I just wondered whether that might have played a part of it. But no, look, the Derby's always going to be a good race. It's always going to be an interesting race. We'd have to see whether it's an Anthony Van Dyke or a Serpentine year, or whether it's a year of a horse of See the Stars or someone of that quality.
And before we move on, Pete, you've referenced then that you have a foolproof system that, apart from the Desert Crown year, always pinpoints the winner of the world's most prestigious classic.
Yes.
So who are the contenders this year?
Oh, no, you can't know.
Why
I can't
not?
tell you yet, Lee,
Why
right?
can't you tell me?
Because essentially it takes me to look through the horses' pedigrees.
Okay.
Right? And I haven't done it yet because I'm lazy.
Okay.
So it's essentially an assessment of a horse's stamina and a horse's class, and it makes me sound cleverer than I am, because most of the time you just end up with a horse towards the top of the market. But you get a few of the longer priced horses as well. My idea was always that I could use it to buy a cheap horse to win the Derby.
Yeah.
And as you know, my record of horses so far, I've not bought a horse to win the Derby, although I've bought lots of cheap horses.
Well, you've almost certainly got closer than the two of us in here. John, what about you? At this stage, have you got one horse you're thinking, that is my Derby horse?
No. I've looked at it a few times now, and I still can't really make head nor tail of it. I think Los Angeles is one I backed at a slightly bigger price, kind of anti-post, but I'm going to just wait for it to take a bit more shape, I think. There's going to be a few more twists and turns, I think, in this market. A
few more twists and turns, and in fact, tomorrow we've got the work at Epsom, the breakfast workout mornings. 4 horses due to work, including the horse on the front page of today's edition of the Racing Post, Dancing Gemini, representing Roger Teal, and along with Ambiente Friendly having come in with the James Fanshawe camp. The race needs this year those sort of stories to mix it up alongside the battalions of Godolphin and Ballydoyle.
Definitely, there's been a real variance this flat season, which has been quite nice so far. We are seeing more yards represented, and that always sounds dreadfully patronising, but I think it is important that you have a wide range of trainers that are able to mix it at that sort of level. And for James Fanshawe and Roger Teal to have horses of that calibre is good, because the likes of Aidan O'Brien do have a lion's share. It was ever thus. Similarly over jumps with Willie Mullins, but wrong time of the year to be talking about that. But it is good to see, and if we had a Derby with a lot of trainers represented, I think that would be good for the race as much as anything else. Keeps it interesting. Yeah,
it does. So fingers crossed those gallops go well in the morning. Okay, before we move on to our second story and the action at Newbury on Saturday, we have a spectacular offer for those of you looking to subscribe to the Racing Post Members Club. Get 50% off your first 3 months in the Racing Post Members Club. As a member, you get access to the digital newspaper exclusively available to members the night before. You'll get daily tips from the likes of Pricewise, Tom Siegel, Robbie Wilders and Paul Keeley. Enjoy award-winning journalism from the industry's best writers and watch replays from all British and Irish racing now available within the Racing Post app. Subscribe today and get 50% off your first 3 months. Welcome back, part 2 now, and Jonathan Harding will lead the way as we look back at the action at Newbury on Saturday, on and off the track.
Yeah, so it was an interesting, informative day at Newbury, a slightly weird one actually. I'll start with the Lockinge. It was quite understandably and quite rightly billed as Big Rock v Inspiral, one of the first proper heavyweight clashes of the flat season. And then a horse by the name of Audience, an apparent sort of pacemaker for Inspiral, also trained by John and Thady Gosden, also owned by Cheveley Park, got what you'd call maybe I don't know if it was a soft lead or just ran in a perfectly straight line, and none of the others even came close, bar Charon towards the end. Sort of tried in vain. Inspiral and Big Rock never really featured in the way that we thought they would. There was excuses there. I think Inspiral probably needed the run. Big Rock, ground went against him, and there's always excuses. But with the winner, it was just a surprise winner of the Lockinge. And really, when you start to, as you know, when you're in the winner's enclosure afterwards, there's a bit of a sort of a debrief and trying to make sense of what we've just seen. And the more we unpicked it, the more actually Audience deserved to be there on ratings, but I think even then still quite surprised about the way that he went and did it, and he looks a really interesting one for the Queen Anne now, and with Inspiral potentially running over a different trip at Royal Ascot. But it was a strange result, and there was a strange mood at Newbury generally. There was sort of some rumblings about Kia Joorabchian and Roger Varian, this being the leading owner. Amo Racing, of course, did an interview with ITV Racing, slightly cryptic. It then came out that he had removed all of his horses from Roger Varian. Obviously, King of Steel, probably his biggest horse, I think is fair to say, sustained an injury not that long ago. So that was sort of rumbling under the surface as well, after seeing a shock winner of the Lockinge. So it was an interesting day at Newbury on Saturday.
Pete, we will move on to the Amo Roger Varian situation in a second. The Lockinge. So ostensibly a shock winner. Well, he was a shock winner. He was 50 to 1 in the morning, turned off at 22 to 1. Got a super ride by Rab Havlin. But if we ran that race again, bear in mind how easily he did seem to win it, do you think he would win it again? Is there a danger that we disregard what happened and say that was one of those fluke results, or was Audience just the best horse on the day in the conditions?
No, it was a completely fluke result. He was. He wasn't even put in there as a pacemaker. He was put in there as a spoiler, wasn't he? He was put in there to bother Big Rock, to mess around with Big Rock, to get in Big Rock's way, and then Big Rock fell out of the stalls and was never involved in the race. Obviously, having had his own interrupted preparation because he's moved stables 3 weeks ago. If we're talking about owners moving horses around and all of that sort of stuff. So, I mean, he was basically running the race as a spoiler. He went out, everyone ignored him, and he got a freebie on the lead. There was a race in Australia not that long ago that Via Sestina was second in. And, you know, when James McDonald came in afterwards, you know, they asked the jockeys for their views, and he said, asked for his view on the race, and he just said he was embarrassed. He was embarrassed with himself. And I think probably quite a lot of the jockeys in that Lockinge on Saturday would be embarrassed with the ride they had. They just they completely ignored that horse and gave him a freebie. But it was great to see Rab Havlin get another Group 1 winner. Obviously, commissioning was his last one, or his first one / last one, a little while ago. I mean, it's been such an enduring partnership, Robert Havlin and the Gosdens, particularly John Gosden. You know, he's done so much. He's been second jockey there for so many years, to Jimmy Fortune and then to Frankie, and now to Kieran Sheemark. Never complained about it. Always goes up. Brilliant work rider. John Gosden stuck next to him when he was banned for 6 months for a failed test in France. You know, it's one of those great, enduring, loyal partnerships that you don't get in racing so much. And I was very pleased to see Rab get the winner that way.
And Pete, do you think of those horses in behind, would you still be expecting Inspiral and Big Rock to make their mark as winners of Group 1 races this year, or even allowing for the race the way it panned out, were you disappointed by the performances?
Well, Inspiral, for all of her brilliance, isn't always brilliant. And that's a sort of odd thing to say. But you know what I mean? Sometimes she sort of flops, isn't she? Yeah. And sometimes she does what she did in the Jacques Lamarois last year, which was one of the most stunning performances I've ever seen from a racehorse. So I'm sure she'll be fine. I quite like this dynamic that she might go over a bit further. Obviously, she did it at the Breeders' Cup. That's an interesting angle with her, and on pedigree, there's prospect for us to do that. Big Rock, I mean, our views of him are slightly warped by what he did at Ascot at the back end of last season when he went off on that bottomless ground and no one ever saw him. So whether he will be better suited to go on a straight mile somewhere like Deauville or maybe back in the QE2 at the end of the year, I would argue that's probably where he is most likely to shine. But no, I think if I had a horse in a Group 1 race, I'd never be that disappointed, Lee.
Yeah, no, I completely see that point. John, again, before we talk about the King of Steel, Kia Joorabchian, Roger Varian situation, there were other good races at Newbury on Saturday. We saw a potential Melbourne Cup contender and yet another exciting winner of the London Gold Cup.
Yeah, so it was Middle Earth, was a good winner for John and Thady Gosden. Desert Hero was just never really featured, weirdly enough. I can't put my finger on why. But Middle Earth was a good winner, and he'll be a Melbourne Cup horse down the line. And similarly, King's Gambit was a good one for the Charlton team. obviously Roger Charlton won that race a few times. It has that reputation, doesn't it? There's usually a top level performer in there somewhere. I think Defoe and Bay Bridge both won that race, and King's Gambit, the only winning favourite on the day, actually did it really easily, really comfortably. So you had the idea off that mark that he would have to be potentially Group 1 class to win it, and the way that he won it suggests that that's certainly the conversation they'll be having. Whether they build him up to that, we'll see over the season. But again, it's another yard that, you know, outside of the Aidan O'Briens and the like. So it was a refreshing result, that, and good that he's got a good horse after taking over from Roger.
Yeah, and Roger Varian has already had a great year. He's a classic winning trainer in 2024, but he will also have had high hopes for King of Steel this year. Just in terms of events of last week, midweek we learned that King of Steel was injured and would miss Royal Ascot, but then there were more developments on Saturday.
Yes, so there was, like I say, there was the interview with the owner, Kia Drabchan, on ITV Racing. There'd been sort of whispers and rumblings that this might have happened and the horses might have been taken away. I think it had been trailed in a few other publications, but never quite confirmed from the horse's mouth, as it were. And he almost stopped short of getting into it, but he did suggest that the King of Steel situation was part of the reason. There's obviously been a falling out of some sort. I thought Roger Varian spoke very well to Lewis Porteous after the news had sort of broken unofficially, and said, look, I'm not going to sling any mud. We've had some good days together with King of Steel and everything else. But it's just another example of this owner, Amo Racing, and a bit of friction with a trainer or jockey, which is, I don't think it does anybody any good. And I don't think it can be that fun for anybody involved either. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, Pete, for right or for wrong, there are people who look on social media comparing Kia Drabchan to Daniel Wildenstein, of course, was a great French owner who regularly moved horses around yards, moved jockeys, moved trainers. It was interesting. Matt Chapman's interview on ITV with him, I thought was particularly good on Saturday. And Matt asked the question towards the end: what has happened? Did it mean that he no longer had horses with Roger Varian? To which Keir said, "You're pushing a button I don't want to discuss. In racing, people don't want to hear the truth, so I don't want to discuss anything else." It almost fueled the fire. I guess disappointing for Roger Varian, but as he made the point himself, he hadn't trained the horse at 2. He'd come to Roger from another trainer.
Well, exactly that, and you know, here Drabchan has moved his horses around plenty. He's the owner. He pays the bills. He can do that. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. My old man, obviously, as you know, is a trainer, and he always said that if someone moves horses to you, you shouldn't be surprised when they move horses away from you. So, I mean, I'm not sure there's a great deal to add beyond the fact that he's the owner and he can take the horses where he wants.
Yeah, I think your old man summed that up pretty perfectly, Pete. Okay, that then was our second story. One more section to go, but before we get to that section, here's some news on free bets. Welcome back to part 3 of this week's edition of The Front Page, and my turn now to lead. And I'm going to be talking about some horses who we said goodbye to in the last week or so. Thankfully, 2 of them still have much ahead of them. We did lose Harchibald, the horse who made headlines for all the wrong reasons in the 2005 Champion Hurdle when he looked set to win under Paul Carberry, came cruising alongside Hardy Eustace and Brave Inca, but then didn't go by on that particular day at Cheltenham. But he was a great horse, 5 Grade 1 wins, 2 victories in the Fighting Fifth, 2 in the Christmas Hurdle when he grabbed Rooster Booster in the closing stages. After that one, had a huge lead. We lost Harchibald at the age of 25. At the age of 11, Scargill has been retired, a tremendously popular performer, a 4 times winner of the Matterson Hurdle at Leopardstown, a dual winner of the Morgiana, carried a welterweight to win the Galway Hurdle under his regular rider, Patrick Mullins, and recently helped Willie Mullins to his British Trainers' Championship with victory in a 3-mile novices handicap chase at Ayr on Scottish Grand National Day. He's been retired at the age of 11. At the age of only 10, we have seen and heard about the retirement of the Grand National winner from last year, Corach Rambler. Lucinda Russell, the trainer, Peter Scudamore, who rides the horse most mornings, and the owners announced during the week that they had decided to call time on Corach Rambler's career after his disappointing run in the Punchestown Coal Cup most recently. Before that, he'd unseated at the first fence in the Grand National and then been knocked over at the second fence of the race. And in my column in the Racing Post today, I've discussed the retirement of Corach Rambler, really just highlighting that Connections felt that there were more cons than pros in terms of continuing his career. Really interesting stuff from Peter Scudamore, who absolutely adores the horse, gets dragged around the yard there by Corach Rambler. And he was saying after the Punchestown race, he looked at the horse in the stables and felt, although he wasn't physically tired, he looked in his eye and he felt he was trying to say to him, I've done enough now, and now is the time to stop. So he will hopefully have a long and happy retirement with Lucinda and Skew up there in Perthshire. Pete, as I say, you were brought up around horses. You know these sort of decisions are always difficult in terms of when to call time on a horse's career. It seemed to me that the way they've presented Corach Rambler's retirement is entirely logical, and there's no point continuing with a horse who doesn't really want to race anymore. Did you sympathise with what they've done?
Entirely, and also, you know, if they've got into their minds that they're worried about what's going to happen when he goes to the racecourse, they're already at a disadvantage anyway, aren't they? I mean, in their minds, they're starting to think, oh, you know, he unseated in the Grand National, it's not going to spend. So there's that doubt creeping in. You can't have any sort of doubt when you're involved in professional sport, can you? You've got to be 100% behind it. So, I mean, I thought your column was fascinating, I have to say. I'm not just saying that because you're the host and I'm trying to butter you up. I thought it was very, and particularly how Peter Scudamore spoke about it, given, you know, he was the man down at Martin Pipes, he was multiple champion jockey. It was all about, and say contrasting with Derek Fox, who's still riding, you know, the way that he's gone a bit sort of more caring and sort of softer and trying to understand the horses a little bit more up in his role with Lucinda Russell. And as a man who's interested in the medication of horses, what he was talking about with firing horses when they were younger and how his view on that's changed as he's got older and he's tried to be more intuitive with horses. I found that fascinating as well. So I would recommend anyone who hasn't done already, and I'm sure most people have, to read Lee's column.
Thank you, Pete. And just in case for any doubt, you've won this week. John, that conversation I had with Stuart, so it's on Friday, but I also referenced a conversation I'd had when I was up there with Derek Fox before the National and in the wood cabin at our Larry stables. Skew had just raised the idea that there was a difficult dichotomy between saying we absolutely adore this horse, and yet we're asking him to race in any race, and in particular in the Grand National. And obviously they ran him in the race, and he's a horse who was bred to race, and that's his job. And but it is interesting when people have these deep thoughts and quandaries in their own head, and nobody loves that horse more than them, and they won't regret anything that they've done. But it does sort of highlight, I think, that there's not necessarily a black and white on these things. There's a lot of nuance.
That's exactly right, and for me that just, it's refreshing to hear, because it highlights the fact that no, it isn't black and white, and it also, to me, flags the fact that they take their responsibilities very seriously. It's not a case of just running horses in like a factory and just, you know, they're done now, off you go, next wave, and it's not a numbers game. These are individuals, the horses, and the fact that they're able to see the nuances behind it is important, because then you can get that across to the public, which I think they did brilliantly in that statement confirming the retirement. You know, it wasn't a, with sadness, he's retired, we're drawing stumps, on to the next one. It was very much a considered take, and I think it's probably echoing the thoughts of a lot of people, just not just in racing but outside of racing, about the use of animals in sport. It's not something that should ever be done lightly. This is what they're bred to do, and we feel that, but at the same time there is always that other emotional attachment that says, but we always want to do right by the horse. And I think they've just surmised that beautifully, and in their handling of Corach Rambler and everything since announcing the retirement, I think it's, yeah, I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, me too. And Pete, I'll come to you for Harchibald because Mr. Harding is waiting.
Well, before you move on,
Go
before you move on,
Go on.
You're cheery in this episode so far, so I need to just bring down the tone slightly. Now, obviously, Corach Rambler was one of the leading chasers in Britain last season, and with his retirement, our pool of horses is even smaller than it was before. I went on the BHA website this morning. I reckon we've got 9 horses rated 160 or above, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them are 9, so they'll be the same age as Corach Rambler next year, and 2 of them are 10. So, we're getting on in terms of the age of these chasers. And for reference, Willie Mullins also has 9 horses rated 160 or over, and there's 22 trained in Ireland in total. So just setting everyone up for a cheery jump season next season.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Pete. That's boosted the mood no end. And of course, we lost poor old Shishkin, didn't we? So he would have been one of those who was in that
exactly
upper rating bracket. It doesn't look great for Team GB in that sense going into next season. Pete, I say, Jonathan, too, you to talk about Harchibald. We most definitely are not. David Jennings, you've been very kind about my column. David Jennings wrote a lovely column about Harchibald in Saturday's edition. Although I did feel that the way he described with euphoria Harchibald catching Rooster Booster in the 2005 Christmas hurdle. That was not how I saw it. As a Rooster Booster devotee, I was devastated, and I'm sure millions around the world were as well. But if you're a Harchibald fan, it was great, and hard not to be a fan of Harchibald because he was a huge character, wasn't he?
Oh, a horse with immense charisma. Between him and Paul Carberry, they were such a great match together. Obviously, for so many people, his life will be champion hurdle where he doesn't go past. But he shouldn't be remembered purely in those terms. I mean, when he got it right, he was so good. So as he did when he broke your heart clearly that day at Kempton.
He did. And I thought we ran an extract from Paul Carberry's autobiography following Harchibald's death, and that was fascinating too because Paul Carberry clearly in his book and thereafter remains adamant that he got things right on Harchibald in that champion hurdle, and had he pressed the button sooner, the horse would not have performed any better. But clearly one that for all connections must still be the thought of what if.
That's true, but if he'd won, I wouldn't have the opportunity to every single year wind up several of my friends who were on Harchibald for that race. So I think personally, I couldn't have seen the race going any better.
It was a vintage champion hurdle. Okay, that then is the end of this week's discussions. Time for me to wrap up the programme. And as I've already made clear, Pete was immensely kind about me earlier on, so he wins. Jonathan, you spoke beautifully about Newbury. I adore Corach Rambler, but as I say, Pete buttered me up to a T, and therefore you are the winner, Mr. Scargill. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Very much appreciated.
Mon plaisir. That then was this week's edition of The Front Page. I have been and remain Lee Mottershead, Jonathan Harding and Pete Scargill. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. Until next week when Mr. Harding is in the chair. Bye-bye.